Let's talk about relationships. I think relationships are an interesting topic, but in the context of African diaspora relationships, I think people who live in a foreign land have additional layers of complexity that burden the relationships that they have and their ability to experience them in ways that are as meaningful as people who are possibly in their native country. Now, I'm not trying to give a relationship advice. I'm simply just exploring the topic, just to shed light on what some of the things that I see and what I'm trying to do to be helpful in this process of people navigating relationships. So, one of the first things I've realized with African diaspora when it comes to relationships is most of the time people just live very far away. Um, they live far away from each other, that they don't even get a good selection of people to really pick from in their communities, if that's what they're focused on. Now, if you're looking to date people outside of your culture, that's a whole different topic, and I have no qualm with it. But let's say you're trying to be in a relationship with people in your own community. You're kind of stuck with certain, you're in a perimeter based on geographics, So, for example, if you live in California, you're not going to be easily meeting people in the East Coast or in other countries. Now, you might all come from the same home country, but because you're now in this, in the diaspora, you don't have as many connections. People in their home country, can basically be going from the supermarket to work and everything, and everybody they meet is essentially a potential candidate for them to date. But when you step outside of your country, when you live outside of your country, for an extended period of time, that scenario is not really quite the case. Now you're kind of put in a world where you are looking maybe to other communities as for partnerships, relationship partnerships, or you're picking from the small pool of candidates within your community. But the interesting thing about that is that these aren't necessarily the same people that you might have necessarily picked if you were at least local to your own community. You know, um, there's a lot of compromises that people make when they don't have a lot of options. And those compromises tend to bite them later on in life because they kind of realize at the core they don't share the same values. They don't share a lot of the similar understandings of who they are, or, they're kind of done with the adventure part of their life and they're kind of looking for more consistency and stability. And their exploratory phase is kind of ended for them. So with that said, I think one of the real challenges is how do you find people in your community in a way that's effective. Now, there's a lot of dating apps out here, but I think these dating apps, they're really geared to the country that you're in. So, like, if you're in the U.S., the dating app is really geared towards Americans. It's not really geared to accommodate, the African diaspora. And then there's apps that actually now are particular to maybe a certain region of the world. Now, the hard part becomes that there's also a business aspect in these dating apps where these dating apps are trying to make profits. But what they find is that when they build these apps, they're building them to serve people in foreign countries, but there's not enough people to sustain the operating costs of the app. So the creators of the app often have very little incentive to maintain or to optimize those tools because there's just not enough pool of people to generate enough revenue. So you'll end up finding that people kind of bunch people together. They'll just be like, "Oh, we're just looking for people." It's like they just say black, Asian, white. Kind of becomes these little like general cesspools of people. So when people are actually using these platforms, they don't really get a sense of they don't really get a sense of community that they're looking for, the unique qualities that they're looking for. They're making a lot of compromises in that process. Now, why am I bringing that up? Because I think there's still some value in what the apps are trying to accomplish in terms of bringing people together, but they're still lacking in a lot of other aspects. They're lacking in terms of the unique cultural identities of people. Also, the proximity is a hurdle that you might find people, but maybe the proximity Also, just circumstances, like individual circumstances, might be very unique to the extent that these people really, even if you introduce them, they might not necessarily gel. For example, um, they might just be of a different social class. For example, as shallow as that might seem, and or economic class, should I say? And because of that, the app does not really convey these ideas effectively to people in a way that they can make um, good decisions. These people who are also in the catfishing world of just creating fake characters and deceiving people because they recognize that there's a lot of people who are going to these spaces with emotional with their hearts very wide open and optimistic, and these people who are preying on that type of character or that kind of person. So there's a lot of predatory behavior on those platforms. Um, so how do we solve this? I guess that's the question. The short answer is I think it's a work in process. I think it's something that we ultimately have to kind of make inches towards helping people connect with each other. One of my goals when I was building the Zifrica platform was to just create a space where people can come together in terms of relationships. But one of the things that I wanted to recognize was that people's relationships situations are very unique. They're not all single, no kids, and just looking for love kind of thing. People have situations where there's some of them are single parents, some of them are seniors. There's different age group categories. There's obviously locational aspects. um, there's just a myriad of unique things, and primarily there's also this idea of just uh, ethnic identities, where people might be looking for a certain culture. They're just looking maybe for their own culture or maybe another culture. And so, how do you serve all these people's needs? I don't think you can really develop one app that solves that problem, but I think you can create a space where people can figure that out for themselves. I think another layer to that is that I don't think you need to charge everybody, a hefty fee every time they just join and want to use the app on a monthly basis. I think you should create a space where people can just use the platform um, as they see fit, as they can afford, because it's sometimes it's just the barrier to entry of cost being too high is prohibitive enough that some people are just not willing to explore something because they simply don't want to spend $10 just to find out that there's nobody out there that they connect with on this platform, and they can't really afford to spend $10 on every single platform and maintain all those platforms. And then you have even predatory apps that are sometimes pretending to have people that are interested in you. I think Match.com had an interesting scenario like that, where they would get you to join, but you couldn't message somebody unless you subscribed. And then what they would do is essentially they would message you and pretend to be somebody who's of interest, taking interest in you. But it turned out that it was actually the company itself that was messaging the customers so they can get them to actually pay for the subscription fee. So it's a bit of a scam that's even being run by the actual platform, which is pathetic to say the least. But that's the nature of what's in play in these environments. Is people that are trying to capitalize on people who are emotionally vulnerable. So when I was creating Zifrika.com, Zfrika, one of the things that I was thinking about was just how to create a space that is random for people in a way that doesn't dictate how they want to interact, but just creates a space for them to interact. So if you go on the website, what you'll see is that I have a bunch of different categories for relationships. Um, I have single moms, I have single parents, people want to talk about the matchmakers, biracial relationships, women's groups, men's groups. I don't think it's about telling people how they should use a space and limiting the way they can use that space, but simply to give them a an environment that they can kind of ultimately slowly tailor. So with the platform, you can sit there and you can chat with people who are single moms. Maybe you're not in a position where you maybe you're not in a position where you're really looking for love. Maybe you came out of a situation and you're just looking for somebody to connect with, and you want to create a space where you can probably even talk to somebody in a friendship kind of dynamic, or maybe you want to compare notes with other women or other men that are kind of in your situation in terms of maybe a single parent. Um, that's really what I was going to create the space for. And if you're looking for marriage, I created a category just called marriage. I haven't really, I'm not imposing what the purpose of the platform in those categories are supposed to be, but I'm simply creating the categories so that people can leverage them. Right now, when you look at the website, you'll probably see a lot more of just like a blogging section where you can leave a post. But eventually, I want to kind of expand that idea to a little more complex versions of it. But I need to collect more data enough to see how, um, what kind of variations seem to be useful to people. So try the website, zifrica.com. See if it's of value in those categories. Give me some feedback. Post some things, you know, and see how it can accommodate you. I think another thing to point out is that in some communities, like I think I could speak for like from what I see in African Kenyan communities, people aren't always explicitly saying that they're looking for love. Sometimes they use other subcategories, like they say they're looking to network or they're looking to just kind of be in spaces that have activities. But there might be within that context that somebody is possibly open to meeting somebody in that space. They haven't necessarily explicitly stated so, but they are open to the idea, um, if such a situation was to develop. And so, with that said, I think that's kind of the thing that I think about is create spaces that people feel like that those spaces can evolve to becoming something more than simply a networking space. People can interact. So I have like chat rooms that I've added there. There's a video conferencing tool that if you feel comfortable enough that you want to video chat with somebody, those spaces are there. I'm trying to also just kind of figure out every variation of how people might want to interact and make sure that that kind of space exists for them. So I hope this summary, you find it useful. I hope you try to check out zifrica.com. I'll leave the link in the descriptions. And if you have any input, leave it in the comments. Give me some feedback on what you think, and give it a try. And hopefully, it leads to something down the road that you find of value. And that's ultimately my end goal. Thank you very much.